The leaders of Russia, Iran, and Turkey are struggling to find common ground on Syria. Their summit in Ankara brings together two of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's most forceful supporters, Tehran and Moscow, with one of his strongest opponents, the Erdogan regime.
All three of those countries hold a whole lot of power on the ground thanks to major military interventions, and now they're looking to turn that into a political solution to end the 7-year-old war. But can they actually do it, and what exactly will Syria look like when they're done? Here's part of what those leaders had to say a bit earlier at that summit.
Thanks to the close cooperation of the guarantor countries, Russia, Iran and Turkey, the level of violence in Syria has been drastically reduced. The main IS forces have been crushed. The combat capabilities of other terrorist organizations have been significantly undermined. Refugees and internally displaced people began to return to their homes.
Today, there is no such power as ISIS. However, there are still remains of ISIS, but they are not a big power anymore. Today, the hope of regional nations to combat terrorism is as strong as ever.
We are determined to remove our borders and the whole of Syria from this chaos. Turkey cannot find peace without Syria finding peace.
Here with us to take what you just heard there and look ahead, Dr. Evgeni Klauber. He's the head of the Francis Brodet Institute for Applied Diplomacy at Tel Aviv University. And with us from Washington, Behnam Taleblu, a senior analyst at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Behnam, let me start with you. If we're just looking at the two sort of tracks of peace talks, both of which that have really failed until now, the UN and this one we're just looking at with those leaders, are Turkey, Russia, and Iran really the only players that can come up with a political solution for Syria, given their power on the ground?
Ultimately not, because as much as the Turkish, Iranian, and Russian capabilities matter, U.S. resolve matters. And U.S. Across two administrations, the Obama administration, the Trump administration, has not been decidedly intervening in the war in Syria besides the campaign to take out ISIS. That may well change, but news out of the White House today seems to confirm that path-dependent track the U.S. has been on. In the absence of that, I definitely think that those three powers who have the most material capability on the ground would look to actually solidify their military gains.
Dr. Klauber, we hear of their often military presence on the ground. Obviously, they hold the power in this part of the Middle East. But as far as we know right now, after their meeting, what plan can they suggest for Syria to hopefully end the war in the country?
I think that the resistance is much on the broader level. It's not just about Syria. What we've heard just now is just the analysis about the clashes and the partnership within Syria, but we need to understand that Russia now is in isolation due to the Skripal poisoning and the sanctions that were applied by more than 20 European countries, including the United States and including NATO, that excluded more than 200 Russian diplomats. And I think that partners Erdogan and Rouhani feel that weakness of Russia, and they use it, and I would say that even abuse it. Because now in this meeting, we see that many issues were solved according to Turkish interest and not according to Russian interest. So Russia doesn't lead this move anymore, as it used to lead it on the Astana rounds, in the 8 Astana rounds. In 8 Astana rounds, Russia was proud to declare that it can bring both sides into one negotiation table, Iranians and the Turks, and the Russians will lead the negotiation process. This is not anymore. Now Russia shows its weakness. For example, take example Turkish Stream. Turkish Stream, Russia would love to have 2 pipes go to Turkey, because Russia wants to deliver its gas back to Europe after it goes to Turkey and to use Turkey as a hub. Meanwhile, Erdogan wants Turkish Stream only 1 pipe, just for domestic needs. And initially, the second pipe was dissolved. So we see how Turkish interests actually are on the first place, while Russia's interests on the second place.
Behnam, back to you in D.C. We're used to hearing how powerful Russia is, specifically in this conflict in this part of the Middle East. Would you agree with Dr. Klauber's remarks that actually Russia is showing signs of weakness? And what does that mean for the power balance between these three leaders as they discuss Syria's future?
Well, Russia may be showing some signs of weakness at the unit level, particularly in the outcome of the talks, if we are to believe the Turkish press, as the doctor was saying. But ultimately, there are things that interest that Russia has on the ground which may actually transcend some of those larger strategic games that was mentioned. Ultimately, Russia does not appear as wedded to the future of the Assad regime as Iran, and that may be a point of leverage. Another point of leverage may be the fact that the Russians gave the Turks this laissez-passer, if you will, or the green light to go through and conduct the Afrin operation. So Russia does have some leverage. We should also read in the question of the S-400 sale, which was moved up from 2020 to 2019. That may be looking to kind of create some leverage with the U.S. Russia does have options in Syria, but I agree that at the inset of these talks, the Turks seem to be coming out on top for now.
Evgeni, let's circle back to the breaking news of the day, which is the U.S. statement, that pretty vague White House statement saying that their mission is coming to a rapid end in Syria. Behnam just told us how much U.S. resolve actually matters in Syria. What do you think Syria is going to look like? What are the implications of no U.S. there anymore?
Not such a bright scenario for Israel, for example, if the United States will drop its forces. But I think that it will happen very soon. I think that Trump will wait, and he will wait until he will actually talk to Putin himself. And as I see Trump's strategy for the next 2 months, he scheduled his meeting first with North Korean leader, and he will bring him his ultimatum. And then, when he will see his response, he will put it on the table on his Putin's talk immediately after. That is why, not by surprise, we see that both meetings were scheduled very closely. Now, what Trump will ask from Putin is, are you with us or are you with them? Very simple. And then it will be very hard, very small place for room for navigation for President Putin. Also, after those promises not to get into Syrian quagmire, as Obama called it, a Syrian quagmire. It was part of his rhetoric, but in reality, I don't think that he will do it, especially after yesterday's call to Benjamin Netanyahu.
Behnam, I just want to ask you briefly, with the whole new national security team, a new advisor, John Bolton, State Department getting a new head, Mike Pompeo, do you think that the sort of atmosphere in the White House might convince Trump otherwise, that he actually should stay in Syria for some time?
Well, one would hope so, and it's not just about personnel in the White House, it's about policy. And the policy decision made on October 13th, 2017 was to not take the nuclear issue, the nuclear threat posed by Iran, and the regional threat, and to not separate them, but actually to integrate them and to deal with the Iranian regional threat, which has been rising and ascendant and a threat to Israel and a threat to Saudi Arabia for over a decade now. And one would hope that it's not personnel driving that, but it's actually the material threat on the ground. And there is a need to combat Iran in various theaters of conflict, be it in Yemen, Syria, Iraq, or elsewhere. And Syria or no other theater should really be put on the back burner. It should be really all at once.
All right, a long list of variables, all with major implications. Behnam Taleblu in Washington and Dr. Evgeni Klauber.